Of course your family, she'd interrupted smoothly, but tonight isn't really about family, Eleanor. It's about opportunity. Victoria could open doors for Jasper that most people spend their entire careers trying to access. One introduction from her could land him clients worth millions. Surely you want what's best for your son. The implication hung heavy in the air. If I truly loved my son, I would make myself small, quiet, useful but unobtrusive. I would sacrifice my dignity for his success, just as I'd sacrificed everything else throughout his life. I'd stared at my daughter-in-law, waiting for Jasper to intervene, to say something, anything that acknowledged I was his mother, not the household staff. Instead, he'd simply nodded along while scrolling through his phone, offering a distracted, "Mom, just cooperate, okay? This is really important." Now, standing in the foyer, I opened the heavy oak door to find Victoria Ashford standing on the porch like a fashion magazine come to life. She wore a white cashmere coat that probably cost more than my first car, the used Honda Civic I'd driven for 15 years while putting my boys through school. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, her makeup expertly applied, her posture radiating the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire privileged life. "You must be the help," she said, not asked, stated as fact, handing me her coat without waiting for confirmation or introduction. The coat was heavier than I expected, lined with silk. "I'm Victoria Ashford. Where should I have my luggage taken?" I started to say, ready to introduce myself as Jasper's mother, but Vanessa materialized beside me like a perfume-scented ghost, her signature Chanel No. 5 announcing her arrival before her voice did. "Victoria. Darling. You look absolutely stunning." Vanessa air-kissed both of Victoria's cheeks in that affected way people do when they want to seem more sophisticated than they are. Come in, come in. How was the drive from Boston?" "Not too terrible with the holiday traffic, I hope. Eleanor will take care of your things." Eleanor, put Victoria's coat in the guest closet and have her bags taken to the blue room upstairs. I stood there holding the expensive coat, feeling its weight in my arms like a physical manifestation of my diminished status in this house. My house. The house my late husband Theodore and I had bought in 1978 with our combined savings, where we'd planted the oak tree in the front yard when Jasper was born, where I'd raised my boys, where every corner held memories of birthday parties and scraped knees and homework sessions at the kitchen table and Christmas mornings filled with laughter and wrapping paper chaos. The house I'd signed over to Jasper during a moment of vulnerability, when I'd been hospitalized for pneumonia and frightened about my future. He'd convinced me it made sense, for tax purposes, he'd said, for estate planning, so there wouldn't be complications when I eventually passed. He'd promised nothing would change, that this would always be my home, that I'd always be taken care of. That promise felt increasingly hollow with each passing month. By the time I returned from hanging Victoria's coat and lugging her surprisingly heavy designer luggage up the stairs to the guest room, a task that left me breathless and my back aching, Victoria was already holding court in the living room. Jasper and Vanessa flanked her like devoted disciples, hanging on her every word with the desperate intensity of people who needed something badly and knew it. "The restaurant scene in Boston has become absolutely derivative," Victoria was saying, swirling a glass of wine that Vanessa must have poured while I was upstairs. "Everyone's doing the same farm-to-table concept, the same industrial chic aesthetic, the same pretentious small plates. There's no originality anymore. No vision. I gave Chez Pierre 2 stars last month, and the chef actually called my editor to complain. Can you imagine? As if whining would change my assessment of his mediocre reduction sauces." Jasper laughed like she'd said something hilariously witty rather than simply mean-spirited. "You have such high standards, Victoria. That's what makes your opinion so valuable." "Standards are all that separate us from chaos," Victoria replied, finally noticing me standing in the doorway. She looked me up and down with the assessing gaze of someone examining a piece of furniture for quality. "You're still here?" "This is Eleanor, Jasper's mother," Vanessa interjected quickly, her smile tight. "She's been helping with the dinner preparations." "Eleanor, why don't you check on things in the kitchen? I think the roast might need basting." The roast didn't need basting. I'd prepared it exactly according to the recipe Vanessa had given me, a complicated affair involving herb crusts and precise temperature controls. But I recognized a dismissal when I heard one, so I retreated to the kitchen, my sanctuary in this house that no longer felt like home. The kitchen was hot from the oven, filled with the rich smells of roasting meat and garlic potatoes and the chestnut stuffing I'd made from my own mother's recipe. I'd been cooking since 6 a.m., preparing the elaborate Christmas Eve feast that Vanessa had planned down to the smallest garnish. Standing at the counter, I let myself rest for just a moment, my hands braced against the cool marble surface. Through the doorway, I could hear their conversation continuing without me, Victoria's voice dominating as she held forth on various topics: restaurants she'd destroyed with bad reviews, celebrities she'd met, exotic locations she'd traveled to for her show. Eleanor. Vanessa's voice cut through my moment of respite. We're ready for the appetizers. I arranged the smoked salmon canapes on the antique silver platter, another family heirloom that had belonged to Theodore's mother, and carried them into the dining room. My hands trembled slightly from fatigue and the weight of the platter, but I managed to serve each person without incident. Thank you, Eleanor, Jasper said absently, not looking at me. Victoria examined her canopy with the critical eye of someone conducting a laboratory experiment. She took a small bite, chewed thoughtfully, then nodded. Acceptable. The cream-cheese ratio is adequate, though I would have added capers for more complexity. I bit my tongue to keep from mentioning that I'd made these exact canapes for 20 years at Christmas, that Theodore had always said they were his favorite appetizer, that multiple people had asked for the recipe over the years. But what did my experience matter in the face of Victoria's professional opinion? Dinner began an hour later, after more wine and more of Victoria's pronouncements on various subjects. I'd set the table with our finest china, the Lenox Christmas pattern that Theodore and I had received as a wedding gift and had used every holiday season for 4 decades. Each plate represented memories: the Christmas when Jasper was 5 and accidentally broke one while trying to help set the table, the year Colin brought his first girlfriend home and was so nervous he could barely eat, the final Christmas before Theodore's death when we'd all been together and happy and I'd had no idea how precious that moment would be. I served the first course, a butternut squash soup with sage oil, and listened as Victoria critiqued every element. The temperature could have been warmer. The sage oil was perhaps too generous. The bread rolls were acceptable but not exceptional. At Le Bernardin in New York, she said, they serve a similar soup, but with truffle shavings and a foam made from aged Parmesan. Now that's sophistication. We'll have to try it sometime, Vanessa gushed. Jasper, maybe for our anniversary? The main course came next, the herb-crusted prime rib I'd been preparing since dawn, roasted to a perfect medium rare, accompanied by garlic rosemary potatoes, glazed carrots, and the chestnut stuffing. I'd spent hours on this meal, had put love and care into every element despite my aching body and wounded heart. I served Victoria first. Vanessa had been very clear about the proper protocol, placing the best slice of meat on her plate, arranging the vegetables artfully, drizzling the au jus just so. This looks. Victoria paused, examining her plate. Adequate. Adequate. 4 hours of cooking reduced to adequate. I served Vanessa next, then moved to Jasper. As I lowered his plate toward the table, Victoria's voice cut through the air like a knife. Actually, I'd like more meat. This portion is rather small for a main course. I looked at her plate. The portion was generous, at least 8 ounces of prime rib. But I nodded. Of course. Let me get you. Just give her Jasper's plate, Vanessa interjected. You can make him another one. I stood there, frozen, Jasper's plate in my hands. Give her my son's dinner? The meal I'd prepared specifically for him, plated with care? Mom, just do it, Jasper said quietly, not looking at me. It's fine. But you haven't eaten since, Eleanor. Vanessa's voice was sharp now, edged with warning. Victoria is our guest of honor. Surely you understand the proper priority here? Give her the plate. I looked at my son, waiting for him to speak up, to say something, to acknowledge that this was wrong. But he just sat there, avoiding my eyes, his jaw tight. Victoria sat waiting, her expression expectant, entitled, as if there was no question that her desires superseded everyone else's needs. My hands trembled as I set Jasper's plate down in front of Victoria instead. She smiled, satisfied, and immediately cut into the meat. "Better portion," she commented. "Though the crust could use more herbs. Perhaps thyme in addition to the rosemary?" I returned to the kitchen, my chest tight, my eyes burning with unshed tears. I prepared another plate for Jasper, but the meat that was left was more well done than he preferred, the vegetables less perfectly arranged. When I brought it to him, he glanced at it and frowned slightly but said nothing. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of humiliation. Every time Victoria's wine glass was less than half full, Vanessa would catch my eye and nod toward the bottle. Every time a course was finished, I was expected to clear the plates immediately. When Victoria complained that the dining room was too warm, I was sent to adjust the thermostat. When she wanted her water glass refilled with ice water, not room temperature, I was dispatched to the kitchen again. I was not a family member at this dinner. I was the help. And through it all, Jasper sat there silently, watching his mother be diminished and degraded, saying nothing, doing nothing, prioritizing his business connections and social advancement over basic human decency toward the woman who had given him life and raised him with everything she had. As I served the dessert, a chocolate torte that had taken me 3 attempts to get right, Victoria announced that she'd be staying through Christmas Day and possibly into the weekend. "I have some business to handle in Millbrook anyway," she said, "and Vanessa mentioned you have a wonderful guest room. Plus, it's so much more pleasant to spend holidays with sophisticated company rather than dealing with commercial airline travel. We'd be absolutely delighted to have you," Vanessa gushed. I felt my heart sink. More days of this. More of being treated like staff in my own former home. More of watching my son pretend I didn't exist except as someone to serve his important guest. Later, after Victoria had finally retired to her room and Jasper had retreated to his home office for some urgent conference call, I was cleaning up the kitchen. My feet ached. My back throbbed. My hands were raw from washing dishes and cleaning surfaces. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her heels clicking against the tile floor. "That went well," she said, pouring herself another glass of wine. Victoria seemed pleased. I kept washing dishes, not trusting myself to speak. "Eleanor, I wanted to thank you," Vanessa continued. "You did exactly what was needed tonight. Staying in the background, being helpful, not making things awkward with unwanted conversation. That's really the best way you can contribute to this family, by understanding your role and filling it gracefully." I turned to look at her, this woman my son had married, this woman who was now the lady of my former house. "My role?" I said quietly. "Yes," Vanessa said, seemingly oblivious to the edge in my voice. "We all have our roles, Eleanor. Mine is to manage the household and Jasper's social life. His is to build his career and provide for us. And yours is to, well, to help however you can. To be useful without being intrusive. I'm his mother." "Of course you are," Vanessa said soothingly, as if speaking to a confused child. "And mothers help their children succeed. That's what you're doing. Tonight was important for Jasper's future, and you played your part perfectly." She left the kitchen, taking her wine with her, leaving me standing alone surrounded by the remnants of the dinner I'd slaved over, the dinner where I'd been treated like a servant while serving the family I'd sacrificed everything to create. I finished cleaning in silence, my mind churning. As I wiped down the counters one final time, I looked around the kitchen, my kitchen, and felt something shift inside me. Something hard and cold and final. I was 70 years old. I'd worked my entire life. I'd raised 2 boys alone. I'd given everything I had, including the literal roof over my head, to ensure my children had good lives. And this was how I was repaid? By being made to feel like a burden? By being treated as household staff? By watching my own son take my dinner plate and give it to a stranger without a word of protest? As I climbed the stairs to my small room at the back of the house, the room that used to be the sewing room, the smallest bedroom, where I'd been relegated to make room for more important guests, I made a decision. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Tomorrow was Christmas Day. The day of giving, they say. But sometimes, I was beginning to realize, the most important gift you can give yourself is the gift of self-respect. And I was about to take mine back. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jasper's face as he watched me hand over his plate to Victoria without a word of protest. I heard Vanessa's voice telling me to understand my role in this family. I felt the weight of that expensive coat in my arms and the even heavier weight of my own diminished worth. My small room at the back of the house felt more like a cell than a bedroom. It was barely 10 feet by 12, with a single window that looked out onto the neighbor's fence. The furniture was mismatched, pieces that Vanessa had deemed too outdated for the main rooms. My double bed frame creaked every time I shifted position. The dresser had a drawer that stuck. The closet was so small that most of my clothes had to stay in boxes stacked in the corner. This room used to be my sewing room, where I'd made curtains and hemmed pants and created Halloween costumes for my boys. Now it was where I'd been tucked away, out of sight, out of mind, except when my labor was needed. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. I sat up in bed, my back protesting the movement, and looked around this cramped space that represented how small my life had become. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph of Theodore and me on our wedding day, young and full of hope, believing we had our whole lives ahead of us. He'd been so handsome in his suit, his smile wide and genuine. I'd worn my mother's wedding dress, altered to fit me, because we couldn't afford a new one. We'd been so happy with so little back then. A small apartment, second-hand furniture, dreams bigger than our bank account. But we'd had love. We'd had respect. We'd had partnership. What would Theodore think if he could see me now? Living in the house we'd built together, treated like an unwelcome obligation by the son we'd loved so completely? I got out of bed and wrapped my old robe around myself, the blue terry cloth one that was fraying at the cuffs but was too comfortable to throw away. The house was silent except for the old furnace humming in the basement and the occasional creak of settling wood. I made my way downstairs carefully, my hand on the railing, mindful of my knees that sometimes gave me trouble on stairs. The kitchen was dark except for the small light above the stove. I put the kettle on for tea and sat at the small breakfast nook where I used to read the morning paper with Theodore, where my boys used to eat cereal before school, where so many ordinary moments of family life had unfolded. As the water heated, I found myself opening drawers and cabinets, taking inventory of this kitchen I knew better than anyone. I'd organized these spaces. I knew where everything lived. The good knives in the third drawer. The serving platters on the top shelf of the corner cabinet. The Christmas china in the buffet hutch. My hands found the metal file box I kept on the top shelf of the pantry, behind the extra paper towels where Vanessa never looked. Inside were documents I'd kept from the old days, birth certificates, my nursing license, Theodore's death certificate, and the original deed to this house. I pulled out that deed and spread it on the counter under the stove light. Theodore Hartwell and Eleanor Hartwell, it read. Purchased in 1978 for $47,000, money we'd saved for years, money that had represented every sacrifice and every extra shift and every denied indulgence. Then I pulled out the other document. The quit-claim deed I'd signed 5 years ago, transferring ownership to Jasper. I remembered that day in the hospital, weak from pneumonia, frightened about my future. Jasper had brought the papers with a notary, explaining it was all for estate planning purposes, to avoid probate, to make things simpler. Nothing will change, Mom, he'd promised. This is still your home. We're just making it official on paper for tax purposes. I'd believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. My firstborn. The baby I'd nursed through colic and walked through nightmares and taught to ride a bicycle and sent off to college with tears in my eyes and pride in my heart. The kettle whistled, pulling me from my thoughts. I made my tea and sat back down, the document still spread before me. As I sipped the hot liquid, feeling it warm me from the inside, I heard a sound from upstairs. Footsteps. Then the toilet flushing. Then more footsteps. A few minutes later, Jasper appeared in the kitchen doorway, also unable to sleep apparently. He wore expensive pajamas, silk, probably, and looked surprised to see me there. Mom? What are you doing up? Couldn't sleep, I said simply. Want some tea? He hesitated, then nodded. Sure. Thanks. I got up and prepared another cup, the familiar ritual of making tea for my son, bringing back memories of when he was young, when he'd come to me with his problems, when I was the person he trusted most in the world. He sat across from me at the breakfast nook, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. For a moment, in the dim light, he looked like my boy again. Vulnerable. Human. Big day yesterday, I said carefully. Yeah. He took a sip of tea. I think it went well. Victoria seemed pleased. I said nothing, waiting. I know it was a lot of work for you, he continued, not quite meeting my eyes. The cooking and serving and everything. I appreciate it. Do you, Jasper? He looked up at me then, something in my tone catching his attention. Of course I do. Because from where I was standing, appreciation wasn't exactly the dominant emotion in that dining room. His jaw tightened. Mom, don't start. Don't start what? Don't mention that you gave my dinner to a stranger. Don't point out that I was treated like household staff in my own home. Don't ask when my son became someone who values business connections more than his own mother's dignity. That's not fair, he said, his voice rising slightly. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My consulting firm is at a critical point. One introduction from Victoria could mean clients worth millions. This isn't about you, Mom. It's about my career, my future, my family's financial security. Your family, I repeated. And which family is that, Jasper? Because I thought I was your family too. You are, but what? But I'm less important? But my feelings don't matter as much as Victoria's opinion of your dinner party? But being your mother means I should just smile and accept whatever treatment you decide is appropriate? He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is exactly what Vanessa said would happen. She warned me you'd make this about you instead of being happy for my success. Vanessa said that, did she? I felt my anger rising now, hot and sharp. The same Vanessa who told me to understand my role and stay in the background? The same one who treats me like I'm a burden she's too polite to mention directly? She doesn't. Jasper stopped, ran his hand through his hair. Mom, Vanessa has been very accommodating. She's let you live here, in our house, even though it's been an adjustment for her. The least you could do is be grateful and helpful instead of making everything difficult. Let me live here? The words came out as a whisper. Jasper, this is my house. No, Mom. It's not. Not anymore. You signed it over to me 5 years ago, remember? This is my house now. Mine and Vanessa's. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. He wasn't even pretending anymore. Wasn't softening the truth or cushioning the blow. Just stating facts, cold and clear. You promised, I said, my voice shaking now. You promised that nothing would change. That this would always be my home. And it is your home, he said, but his tone suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. You have a room here. You're taken care of. You have food, shelter, everything you need. But yes, Vanessa and I are the homeowners now, and sometimes that means we need to make decisions about how things run. Like when we have important guests, we need everyone to be on the same page about protocols and expectations. Protocols, I repeated. For treating your mother like a servant. Oh my God, Mom, you're being so dramatic. He threw up his hands. You helped with dinner. You served food. That's not being a servant, that's being helpful during a party. Lots of people help host when there are guests. Why are you making this into some kind of tragedy? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The boy I'd raised would never have spoken to me this way. The young man who used to thank me for his packed lunches and call me just to chat would never have reduced my pain to drama. When did you become this person? I asked quietly. What person? Someone who measures people by their usefulness. Someone who trades relationships for opportunities. Someone who can watch his mother be humiliated and feel nothing but annoyance that she might mention it afterward. Jasper's face hardened. I'm a person who understands how the world actually works, Mom. Not everyone can afford to be idealistic about family and loyalty and all that sentimental stuff. Some of us have to make difficult choices to get ahead. I'm building something here. A real business, a real reputation, a real life. And yes, sometimes that means prioritizing differently than you might like. Prioritizing business over basic human decency. Prioritizing my future over your hurt feelings, yes. He picked up his mug and dumped the remaining tea in the sink. I thought you'd be proud of me. I thought you'd want to see me succeed. Instead, you're guilt-tripping me for not making you the center of attention at a business dinner. I don't want to be the center of attention, Jasper. I just want to be treated like I matter. Like I'm more than a convenient source of free labor. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you signed over your house and made yourself dependent on us, he snapped. The words hung in the air like poison gas. I felt like I'd been slapped. You didn't just say that. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, but he didn't take it back. I'm just saying, you made choices too. You chose to give me the house. You chose to move in here instead of keeping your own place. Those choices have consequences. I was in the hospital. I was scared. You told me it was just paperwork, that nothing would change. Things change, Mom. Life changes. People have to adapt. He headed toward the door, clearly done with this conversation. I'm going back to bed. We have a long day tomorrow, Christmas dinner, and Victoria's still here, so we'll need your help again. I hope you can be more cooperative than you're being right now. He left me sitting there in the dark kitchen, my tea gone cold, my heart racing with anger and hurt and something else. Something harder. Something that felt like resolve crystallizing into action. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the documents still spread on the counter. The original deed with mine and Theodore's names. The quitclaim deed with my signature. Then I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. The quitclaim deed had been notarized, but there was something off about it. The notary's seal looked slightly smudged. The date was correct, but the witness signature seemed rushed, almost illegible. I got up and turned on more lights, examining the document more carefully. My hands were shaking, but not from age or cold. From something else entirely. I pulled out my phone, the basic smartphone Jasper had gotten me 2 years ago when my old flip phone finally died, and started taking pictures of both documents. Then I opened the browser and began searching for information about quitclaim deeds, about property transfers, about elder law in Connecticut. As dawn began to break outside the kitchen window, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, I was still reading. Learning. Planning. By the time I heard movement upstairs, Vanessa's heels clicking across the bedroom floor above me, Victoria's door opening, the shower starting to run, I had made several decisions. First, I was going to get through Christmas Day. I was going to smile and serve and play the role they'd assigned me one last time. Second, I was going to call my old friend Margaret Whitestone after the holiday. Margaret was a retired real estate attorney who'd helped Theodore and me buy this house back in 1978. We'd lost touch over the years, but I knew she was still practicing part-time, helping seniors with property issues. And third, I was going to stop crying and start fighting. At 70 years old, I'd spent enough time being accommodating, being helpful, being grateful for crumbs from the table I'd set. It was time to remind my son and his wife that Eleanor Hartwell was not a woman to be dismissed. Christmas morning arrived with all its false cheer. Vanessa came downstairs in a designer loungewear set that probably cost more than my monthly pension, her makeup already perfect, her hair styled even though it was barely 7 a.m. "Merry Christmas, Eleanor," she said brightly. "Did you sleep well?" "Fine, thank you," I lied. "Wonderful. I've made a list of things we'll need for today." She handed me a piece of paper covered in her precise handwriting. "Victoria wants mimosas with brunch, so we'll need fresh orange juice, hand-squeezed, not store-bought. And the turkey needs to go in the oven by 9 o'clock if we're going to eat at 3 o'clock. I've written down the temperature and timing. Oh, and she'd like Belgian waffles for breakfast with fresh berries and real maple syrup. Do we have everything for that? I looked at the list. It would take me hours to complete everything on it. My feet were still sore from yesterday. My back ached. My hands were stiff. I'll get started, I said simply. Vanessa smiled. You're such a help, Eleanor. I really do appreciate it, you know. Not everyone is lucky enough to have family willing to pitch in like this. Pitch in. As if I had a choice. As if this was voluntary contribution rather than expected labor. I spent the morning in the kitchen while Vanessa and Victoria sat in the living room, opening gifts and drinking mimosas and laughing about shared memories from their college days. Jasper joined them eventually, and I could hear him trying too hard, laughing too loud at Victoria's stories, working to impress her. Around noon, as I was basting the turkey, Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway. Eleanor, is it? She said. I wanted to ask, do you have any dietary restrictions we should know about? It was the first time she directly addressed me in the 18 hours she'd been in this house. No, I eat everything, I replied. Good, good. She leaned against the doorframe, watching me work. You know, Vanessa mentioned you used to be a nurse. That must have been interesting work. It was, I said carefully, unsure where this was going. I always admire people who go into service professions, Victoria continued. It takes a certain personality to enjoy helping others, to find satisfaction in being useful rather than being in charge. Not everyone has that temperament. The condescension was breathtaking. She was basically calling me a natural-born servant, someone whose happiness came from being used by others. I found satisfaction in healing people, I said, keeping my voice even. In using my skills and knowledge to make a difference in patients' lives. That's not quite the same as simply being useful. Victoria raised an eyebrow, perhaps surprised that I'd pushed back, even mildly. Of course not. I didn't mean to suggest, Eleanor, do you need help with anything? Vanessa appeared behind Victoria, her smile tight. Victoria, darling, let's let her work. She knows what she's doing. Translation: stop talking to the help and come back to the living room where you belong. They left, and I continued cooking. The turkey. The stuffing. The green bean casserole. The sweet potato soufflé. The cranberry sauce. The dinner rolls. The 3 different pies for dessert. My mother had taught me to cook when I was young. It had been one of our bonding activities, standing side by side in her tiny kitchen, learning how to make food that nourished and comforted. I'd taught both my sons the same way, wanting them to have that skill, that connection to family tradition. Jasper never cooked anymore. Vanessa handled meal planning by ordering from expensive restaurants or hiring caterers. The kitchen had become just another room to be decorated rather than the heart of the home it used to be. At 3 o'clock, I called everyone to the table. I'd set it beautifully again, using all my skills from years of hosting holidays. The turkey sat in the center, golden and perfect. The side dishes surrounded it like offerings at an altar. We took our seats, Victoria at the head of the table, the position that used to be Theodore's. Vanessa and Jasper on either side of her. And me at the far end, the seat closest to the kitchen door, for easy access to fetch whatever might be needed. Jasper carved the turkey, and I served the plates, starting with Victoria as instructed. This looks lovely, Victoria said, examining her plate. Eleanor, you've outdone yourself. It should have been a compliment. But the way she said it, the way she looked at me, made it clear she was commending a servant for good service, not thanking a family member for their contribution. We began eating. The food was delicious, I knew this objectively, even if I couldn't quite taste it past the bitterness in my mouth. So Victoria, Jasper said, Vanessa mentioned you might know people on the Millbrook Planning Commission. My firm has been trying to get a meeting about the new development project near the waterfront. And they were off, talking business, talking connections, talking about who knew whom and who could open which doors. I might as well have been invisible. Halfway through the meal, Victoria set down her fork. Vanessa, this cranberry sauce is exceptional. Did you make it yourself? Vanessa didn't miss a beat. It's an old family recipe. I'm so glad you like it. I nearly choked on my water. That cranberry sauce was my mother's recipe. The one I'd been making every Thanksgiving and Christmas for 40 years. The one I'd taught Vanessa when she'd first married Jasper and wanted to learn some traditional dishes. You should give me the recipe, Victoria said. I might feature it in my next cookbook. I'm working on a chapter about holiday classics with a modern twist. I'd be honored, Vanessa replied, smiling. My mother's recipe, that Vanessa was now claiming as her own, was going to be in a famous cookbook without any acknowledgement of its real source. I said nothing. I swallowed my words along with my food and continued eating. After dinner, as I was clearing the plates, I heard Vanessa ask, Eleanor, would you mind doing the dishes? Victoria and I want to go through some old photo albums, and Jasper needs to make some business calls. Of course, I said. Because what else could I say? This was my role now, after all. The help. The useful one. The person who made everything possible while receiving none of the credit. I stood at the sink, washing dishes by hand because Vanessa had decided the dishwasher was too loud and might interrupt their conversation in the next room. My hands were in hot, soapy water, and I was scrubbing a roasting pan when I heard them laughing in the living room. You've trained her so well, Victoria's voice carried clearly. She's very obedient. Those words again. Almost the exact same phrase from the original story I'd heard from a friend about her own terrible daughter. It seemed that entitled people everywhere used the same vocabulary. She knows her place, Vanessa replied, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. It took some time, but she understands now that the most valuable thing she can offer is her willingness to help without expecting recognition. Some people are born to lead, and others are born to serve. Eleanor has finally accepted which category she falls into. I stood there, my hands still in the water, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. This was what they really thought of me. Not as Jasper's mother. Not as the woman who'd sacrificed everything to raise him. Not as Theodore's widow or a retired nurse or a human being with feelings and dignity. Just someone who existed to serve. Someone who'd finally learned her place. I dried my hands carefully, folded the dish towel, and walked out of the kitchen. Through the living room where they sat, past Jasper's office where I could hear him on a conference call even on Christmas Day, and up the stairs to my small room. I closed the door, sat on my bed, and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to cry. 5 minutes to grieve for the family I'd thought I had, for the son I'd loved who'd become a stranger, for the life I'd lived that had led me to this moment. Then I dried my eyes, reached for my phone, and called Margaret Whitestone. She answered on the third ring. Eleanor? Is that you? Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Margaret, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm sorry to bother you on a holiday, but I need legal advice. It's about my house. Give your plate to Victoria, she's our guest of honor. My own son said those words to me at Christmas dinner. I handed it over with shaking hands, but what I did 3 days later left my entire family in shock. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Stay until the very end and comment what country you're watching from. I want to see how far my story travels. At 70 years old, I thought I'd seen every shade of disrespect life could paint. I had raised 2 boys on my own after my husband Theodore passed away from a sudden heart attack when they were just teenagers. I worked double shifts as a nurse at Riverside General Hospital in Millbrook, Connecticut, sacrificed vacations I desperately needed, delayed my own dreams of opening a small bakery, all to make sure my sons, Jasper and his younger brother Colin, had every opportunity one never did. I gave them everything. Piano lessons, summer camps, college tuition paid in full so they wouldn't start their adult lives drowning in debt. I attended every sports game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference, even when I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. I was both mother and father, provider and nurturer, disciplinarian and best friend. But standing in Jasper's oversized dining room that cold Christmas Eve, watching my daughter-in-law Vanessa arrange place settings with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a complicated operation, I realized I'd been living in a fool's paradise about what family could become when money and social status entered the equation. "Eleanor, make sure those wine glasses are spotless," Vanessa called from across the room, not even bothering to look in my direction. Her voice had that particular tone she used when addressing me, not quite rude, but lacking any warmth or respect. Victoria has a very refined palate, and she notices every tiny imperfection. I cannot have anything less than perfect tonight. I ran my cloth over the crystal glasses one more time, my arthritic fingers protesting the repetitive motion. Each swipe sent small jolts of pain through my knuckles, but I kept going. These weren't just any glasses, they were Waterford crystal, part of a set Vanessa had purchased during their last trip to Ireland. She'd mentioned the price once, casually, the way wealthy people do when they want you to understand the value of things you're touching. $200 per glass. Victoria Ashford. The name had been mentioned approximately 1,000 times in the past 2 weeks. Victoria this, Victoria that, Victoria expects, Victoria prefers, Victoria once said. I'd learned more about this woman I'd never met than I knew about some of my own cousins. Victoria was Vanessa's former college roommate from their days at Pemberton Academy, some elite private college in Massachusetts that cost more per year than I used to make in 3. She was now a wildly successful restaurant critic with a syndicated column that appeared in over 50 newspapers nationwide. She had her own cooking show on a premium cable network, had published 2 best-selling books about culinary experiences around the world, and apparently possessed the power to make or break restaurants, chefs, and careers with a single scathing review or glowing recommendation. Jasper, darling, Vanessa continued, adjusting a centerpiece of white roses and holly for what must have been the 4th or 5th time. Did you confirm the reservation at Chateau Blanchette for next week? Victoria mentioned she might be able to introduce us to Chef Laurent, and you know what that could mean for your consulting firm. My son appeared in the doorway, straightening his silk tie, a Christmas gift from Vanessa that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. At 42, Jasper had become someone I barely recognized. He'd always been ambitious, driven, but there used to be warmth there too. Kindness. Now, when I looked at him, I saw a man who measured every relationship by its potential return on investment. Already done, sweetheart, he replied, not looking up from his phone. I also sent her assistant that list of connections you wanted me to cultivate. And I reached out to the Hendersons about joining their country club. Victoria's a member there too, apparently. I watched this exchange, feeling increasingly invisible, like a ghost haunting my own former home. When had my son become this person? This man who spoke about human relationships like they were business transactions to be optimized? This stranger who scheduled people like appointments and rated them by their social usefulness? I remembered the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he was scared during thunderstorms, who cried when he accidentally stepped on a snail, who once used his allowance to buy me flowers because I'd had a hard day at work. Where had that child gone? What had I done wrong in raising him that he could stand here now, talking about cultivating connections while his own mother polished glasses with aching hands? The doorbell chimed at exactly 6 p.m., cutting through my melancholy thoughts. Victoria didn't believe in being late, apparently. Or early. Just precisely, perfectly, obsessively on time. Eleanor, get the door, Vanessa instructed, smoothing her designer dress, a midnight blue silk number that hugged her gym-toned figure perfectly. And remember what we discussed this morning? Smile, be gracious, and stay in the background. Don't monopolize conversation. What we discussed. The conversation from that morning still burned in my chest like acid reflux, leaving a bitter taste that no amount of water could wash away. Vanessa had sat me down in the kitchen, my own kitchen, in the house I'd signed over to Jasper 5 years ago when my health started declining and my doctor suggested I shouldn't be living alone anymore. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, where I'd taught both my boys how to crack eggs and measure flour, where Theodore and I used to dance to old records on Saturday mornings. Eleanor, Vanessa had begun, her voice taking on that patient but firm tone people use when explaining something to a child. Victoria expects a certain level of sophistication when she dines. She's accustomed to a particular standard of service and ambience. Tonight is incredibly important for Jasper's business connections and, frankly, for our social standing in Millbrook. I'd nodded, unsure where this was going but already feeling a knot forming in my stomach. Just be helpful tonight, she'd continued, still not quite meeting my eyes, instead focusing on her manicured nails. Serve the dishes, keep the wine glasses filled, clear plates between courses, but don't insert yourself into conversations unless specifically addressed. Victoria isn't accustomed to overly casual family dynamics. She comes from old money, you understand. Very formal upbringing. Vanessa, I'd said carefully, choosing my words like stepping stones across a creek, I am Jasper's mother. This is a family dinner on Christmas Eve. Surely I'm allowed to participate in. Margaret Whitestone's office was in a converted Victorian house on Maple Street, just 3 blocks from the town square. I'd driven past it 1,000 times over the years but had never imagined I'd need to walk through its blue-painted doors seeking help against my own son. The day after Christmas, I'd told Vanessa I had a doctor's appointment. She'd barely looked up from her phone, just waved me away with a distracted, drive carefully. The lie had come easily, which should have bothered me more than it did. But I was past the point of guilt over small deceptions. The reception area still had its original crown molding and hardwood floors, though the furniture was modern and professional. A young woman at the desk, couldn't have been more than 25, smiled warmly as I entered. Mrs. Hartwell? Ms. Whitestone is expecting you. Go right on back, second door on the left. Margaret's office was exactly what I'd expected, shelves lined with law books, a massive oak desk covered in neat stacks of files, and photographs of her grandchildren scattered among the professional certificates on the walls. Margaret herself had aged well, her hair was completely white now, but her eyes were as sharp as ever behind stylish reading glasses. Eleanor. She stood and came around the desk to embrace me. It's been far too long. How many years? At least 10, I admitted. Since Theodore's funeral. Too long indeed. She gestured to a comfortable chair across from her desk. Sit, please. Can I get you coffee? Tea? Nothing, thank you. I appreciate you seeing me so quickly, especially right after the holiday. Margaret settled back into her own chair, folding her hands on the desk. Your call worried me, Eleanor. You sounded, well, not like yourself. Tell me what's going on. And so I did. Starting from the beginning, the quit-claim deed signed 5 years ago, the gradual shift in how I was treated in the house, Vanessa's increasing demands, Jasper's cold dismissal of my feelings, and finally, the humiliations of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Margaret listened without interrupting, but I watched her expression change from concern to disapproval to outright anger. Let me see the documents, she said when I finished. I pulled out the folder I'd brought, copies of both the original deed and the quit-claim deed, along with my hospital records from 5 years ago showing I'd been admitted with severe pneumonia during the time the transfer occurred. Margaret studied the papers carefully, her reading glasses sliding down her nose as she examined every detail. After several long minutes, she looked up at me. Eleanor, this quit-claim deed is problematic for several reasons. First, the timing, you signed this while hospitalized with a serious illness. That alone raises questions about whether you were under duress or lacked the capacity to fully understand what you were signing. My heart began to beat faster. What does that mean? It means we might be able to challenge the validity of this transfer. She pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. Second, the notarization is questionable. See here? She pointed to the notary seal. This smudging, the way the signature overlaps the seal, these are signs of potential irregularity. A notary is supposed to witness the signing and verify the signer's identity and willingness. If you were heavily medicated or coerced in any way, that notarization shouldn't have happened. I was on several medications, I said, remembering. Pain medication, antibiotics, something for anxiety. I was barely conscious most of that week. Margaret made more notes. Third, there's the question of undue influence. Did Jasper have power of attorney over your affairs at that time? He did, yes. I'd given it to him when I went into the hospital, for medical decisions and to pay my bills while I was sick. And did he use that authority to pressure you into signing over your house? I thought back to that hospital room, the papers spread across my lap, Jasper's voice explaining it was all routine, necessary, for my own protection. I'd been so scared, so weak, so dependent on him to handle everything. I think he did, I said quietly. I didn't see it that way at the time, but looking back, yes. He made it seem like I had no choice, like this was the only responsible option. Margaret set down her pen and looked at me directly. Eleanor, I'm going to be straight with you. Challenging a deed transfer 5 years after the fact is difficult. There are statutes of limitations to consider, and courts generally prefer to uphold property transfers unless there's clear evidence of fraud or incapacity. But in your case, we have several factors working in our favor. Such as the timing of the transfer during a medical emergency, the questionable notarization, your age and health status at the time, the fact that you've received no consideration for the transfer. You gave away a house worth what? At least $400,000 in today's market, and received nothing in return except a promise of continued residence, which is now being used to control and manipulate you. $400,000. I hadn't thought about it in such concrete terms before. That's what my home was worth. That's what I'd given away. There's also the issue of elder abuse, Margaret continued. Connecticut has laws protecting seniors from financial exploitation by family members. What you're describing, being treated as unpaid household labor, having your contributions go unrecognized, being threatened with loss of housing if you don't comply with unreasonable demands, these are all indicators of exploitation. I don't want to think of my son as abusive, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Margaret's expression softened. I know, Eleanor. This is your child. But abuse isn't always intentional or malicious. Sometimes it's simply taking advantage of someone's vulnerability and love. And that's exactly what's happened here. She pulled out a fresh legal pad and began outlining a plan of action. Here's what I propose. First, we do a title search to confirm the current ownership status and look for any irregularities in the transfer process. Second, we gather evidence of your current living situation, documentation of how you're being treated, witness statements if possible, any written communications that show the nature of your arrangement with Jasper and Vanessa. What kind of communications? Text messages, emails, anything where they've made demands or expressed their expectations of you. Anything that shows this isn't a normal family living arrangement but rather something closer to servitude. I thought about the group text Vanessa had started months ago called House Management, where she sent me lists of tasks. I'd felt uncomfortable about it at the time but had told myself I was being oversensitive. I have texts, I said. Lots of them. Good. Forward them all to me. Also, I want you to start keeping a diary. Write down every interaction, every demand, every instance where you're treated as help rather than family. Dates, times, witnesses if there were any. Be specific and factual. Okay. My head was spinning with all the information. Third, we need to establish your mental and physical competency both now and at the time of the transfer. I'll need you to undergo a cognitive evaluation with a doctor I work with, not to suggest you're incompetent now, but to demonstrate that you clearly understand what's happening and can make your own decisions. We'll also need your medical records from 5 years ago to show your state when you signed the deed. I can get those. Margaret leaned back in her chair. Eleanor, I have to ask you something important. What's your goal here? Do you want to regain ownership of the house? Do you want financial compensation? Do you want to ensure you have secure housing? Or do you want to punish Jasper for how he's treated you? I'd been thinking about this question since Christmas Day. I want my dignity back, I said finally. I want Jasper to understand that I'm not someone to be used and discarded. I want him to see what he's become. And yes, I want my house back. Not because I need to own it, but because he promised nothing would change and then used that ownership to control me. That was wrong. It was wrong, Margaret agreed. And we're going to fight it. But I need you to understand that this might get ugly. Jasper will likely hire his own lawyer. There might be accusations, attempts to paint you as confused or vindictive. Family relationships will be strained, possibly beyond repair. They're already beyond repair, I said. The son I raised wouldn't treat me like he has. That person is already gone. Margaret nodded slowly. Then let's get started. I'm going to draw up a notice of intent to challenge the deed transfer. We'll send it to Jasper via certified mail, which gives him formal notice that you're disputing the ownership and considering legal action. That often motivates people to negotiate. You think he'll negotiate? I think he'll panic, Margaret said bluntly. If this house is in his name, he's probably used it as collateral for loans or lines of credit for his business. He's probably refinanced based on the equity. If the ownership is suddenly in question, that creates major problems for him financially. And if he's smart, he'll want to settle this quietly rather than have it play out in court where all the ugly details become public record. The thought of Jasper panicking gave me a grim satisfaction. Good. Let him feel some of what I'd been feeling. There's one more thing, Margaret said. I noticed in the documents that Jasper has a brother. Colin, right? Yes, my younger son. He lives in Seattle. We don't talk as much as we used to. He's busy with his own life, his own family. Does he know what's been happening? No. I didn't want to worry him or create family drama. He and Jasper aren't particularly close anymore anyway. Margaret made a note. We might need to contact him. If Jasper tries to claim that the house transfer was your idea, that you wanted him to have it, Colin's testimony about your relationship with the house and your intentions could be valuable. The thought of dragging Colin into this made me uncomfortable, but I nodded. If necessary. All right. Margaret stood, signaling the end of our meeting. I'll start the paperwork today. The title search will take a few days, maybe a week. In the meantime, keep that diary, forward me those text messages, and try to act as normal as possible at home. Don't let Jasper know you're taking action until we're ready to make our move. Act normal, I repeated. Pretend everything is fine while gathering evidence against my own son. I know it's not easy, Eleanor. But the element of surprise is on our side right now. Let's not lose that advantage. I left Margaret's office feeling both energized and exhausted. For the first time in months, maybe years, I had a plan. I had someone on my side. I had hope. But as I drove back toward the house, that hope was tempered by the reality of what I was about to do. I was going to war with my own child. There would be no going back from this. I pulled into the driveway and sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage. Through the front window, I could see Vanessa in the living room, probably redecorating again. Jasper's car was gone. He was likely at his office, always working, always chasing the next big opportunity. I thought about Theodore, about what he would think of all this. He'd always been protective of family, believed in loyalty above all else. But he'd also been a man of principle. He wouldn't have tolerated anyone treating me this way, not even his own son. Give me strength, I whispered to his memory, then got out of the car and went inside. Vanessa looked up as I entered. How was the doctor? Fine, I lied smoothly. Just a routine checkup. Good. Listen, I'm having some friends over for lunch tomorrow, the Hendersons and the Blackwells. Nothing fancy, just salads and sandwiches. Can you handle that? Can you handle that? Not, would you mind, or, could you help, but an assumption that I would, of course, provide free catering service. Of course, I said, smiling. What time? Noon. And Eleanor? Try to make yourself scarce once you've served everything. These are important connections for Jasper, and we want to keep things sophisticated. Sophisticated. Code 4, without you. I understand, I said. That evening, after Jasper came home and they'd both retreated to their respective activities, him to his office, her to a yoga class, I sat in my small room and began the diary Margaret had requested. December 26th, I wrote. Vanessa asked me to host lunch for her friends tomorrow. Not asked, told. Instructed me to make myself scarce after serving. Direct quote, keep things sophisticated. Implied meaning, my presence makes things less sophisticated. It felt strange, documenting my own humiliation in such clinical terms. But as I wrote, I found it oddly therapeutic. Seeing it all laid out in black and white made it harder to gaslight myself, harder to wonder if maybe I was overreacting. I spent the next hour forwarding text messages to Margaret's email. There were hundreds of them. Vanessa's task lists. Her corrections when I didn't do things to her specifications. Her reminders about appropriate behavior when they had guests. One thread from 3 months ago was particularly damning. Vanessa, Eleanor, I noticed you joined us in the living room yesterday when we had clients over. In the future, please stay in the kitchen unless specifically needed. It's less confusing for guests. Me, I'm sorry, I thought since they were discussing the renovation, I might have helpful information about the house's history. Vanessa, we prefer to handle client relations professionally. Your input, while appreciated, isn't necessary for these conversations. Reading it again now, with clear eyes, I saw it for what it was, a systematic effort to erase me from my own home, to reduce me from family member to invisible servant. The next day, I prepared lunch for Vanessa's friends. Chicken salad with grapes and walnuts. Cucumber sandwiches with cream cheese and dill. A beautiful fruit platter. Homemade lemonade. When the guests arrived, I served everything with a smile, then retreated to my room as instructed. From upstairs, I could hear their laughter, their animated conversations about book club and yoga classes and the new boutique opening downtown. No one asked where I was. No one seemed to notice my absence. I sat on my bed, continuing my diary entries, documenting everything. The hours I'd spent preparing food I wouldn't be invited to eat. The fact that I'd been explicitly told to stay out of sight. The casual way Vanessa had referred to this house as ours, when speaking to her friends, with no acknowledgement that it had been mine first. That afternoon, my phone rang. Margaret. Eleanor, I have the preliminary title search results. We need to talk. My heart jumped. What did you find? Are you somewhere private where you can talk? I looked around my small room. Yes. Good. First, the title is indeed in Jasper's name alone, just as the quit-claim deed indicated. But here's what's interesting. 6 months after the transfer, he took out a home equity line of credit against the property. $200,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. 200,000? Yes. And it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. Last year, he refinanced the house entirely. Took out a new mortgage for $350,000. He's been using your house as his personal ATM machine. But why? His consulting business is successful. He drives an expensive car, they go on luxury vacations, exactly. Where do you think that money is coming from? Eleanor, I think your son has been living beyond his means and using the house equity to fund his lifestyle. If he suddenly loses ownership of that house, he's on the hook for a mortgage he probably can't afford, plus the equity line he's been drawing from. I sat down heavily on my bed. So he can't give me back the house even if he wanted to. Not without coming up with over $500,000 to pay off the loans he's taken against it. And I'd bet good money he doesn't have that kind of cash sitting around. What does this mean for our case? It means we have leverage. It also means Jasper's motivation to fight this is going to be intense. He's not just protecting his inheritance or his family home, he's protecting himself from financial ruin. If the deed transfer is invalidated, those loans become problematic. The bank could call them in, demand immediate repayment, or, if they determine the loans were secured through fraudulent means, pursue legal action against him. My head was spinning. Fraudulent means? If he obtained those loans knowing that his ownership of the house was questionable, yes. But that's not our primary concern right now. What matters is that we're building a strong case. The fact that he immediately began extracting equity from the house suggests the transfer wasn't made for your benefit, as he claimed, but for his own financial gain. When do we send him the notice? I'm finishing it today. It'll go out tomorrow via certified mail. He should receive it by the end of the week. After we hung up, I sat in my room for a long time, processing everything. My son had taken my house and immediately mortgaged it to the hilt. He'd borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars against property that should have been my security in old age. And he'd done it all while telling me nothing had changed, while expecting me to be grateful for being allowed to live in my own home. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I almost couldn't believe it. This wasn't just thoughtlessness or selfishness. This was deliberate financial exploitation. That evening at dinner, another meal I'd prepared and served, I watched Jasper carefully. He seemed stressed, distracted. He checked his phone constantly, barely touched his food. "Everything okay, dear?" Vanessa asked him. "Fine. Just some business complications. Nothing to worry about. You've been very tense lately. Maybe we should book that spa weekend we talked about. Get away, relax." A spa weekend funded by equity stolen from his mother's house, I thought bitterly. "Maybe after this next deal closes," he said. "I need to stay focused right now." Later, when I was cleaning the kitchen, Jasper came in to refill his wine glass. We were alone for the first time since our confrontation on Christmas morning. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than it had been that night. "I wanted to apologize for what I said. About you making yourself dependent on us. That was harsh." I turned to look at him, surprised. "Thank you for saying that. Things have been really stressful with work, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." He seemed genuine, almost like my old Jasper for a moment. "I know you've been helpful, and I appreciate it. I really do." For just a second, I wavered. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved with better communication. Then I remembered, $200,000 in equity loans. $350,000 in refinancing. My house turned into his personal bank account while he told me nothing had changed. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "I know you're under a lot of pressure." He smiled, relieved. "I'm glad you understand. You always understand. That's what makes you such a great mom." He left the kitchen, and I stood there, my hands in dishwater again, wondering if he had any idea what was coming. Probably not. He'd gotten so used to me being compliant, understanding, accommodating. He thought a simple apology could smooth over everything, that I'd continue playing my role indefinitely. He had no idea that his great mom had spent the afternoon documenting his financial crimes. That she'd hired a lawyer. That in a few days, he'd be receiving a certified letter that would shatter his comfortable world. I finished the dishes, wiped down the counters, and went upstairs to my room. I pulled out my diary and made another entry, including his apology and my internal reaction to it. Margaret had said to document everything, and I was becoming a diligent student. As I wrote, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, powerful. Not powerful in the way Vanessa was, through control and manipulation. But powerful in the way that comes from standing up for yourself, from refusing to accept unacceptable treatment, from fighting back. At 70 years old, I was finally learning that being a good mother didn't mean being a doormat. That loving your children didn't require sacrificing your dignity. That family loyalty was supposed to run both ways. Jasper had forgotten that last part. But he was about to be reminded. I finished my diary entry, then opened my laptop and sent Margaret one more email. "Margaret, I'm ready. Send the letter. Let's do this." Her response came 5 minutes later, "Letter going out first thing tomorrow morning. Buckle up, Eleanor. Things are about to get interesting." I closed the laptop and turned off the light. For the first time in months, I fell asleep quickly, my dreams untroubled by anxiety or doubt. The war had begun. And I intended to win. The certified letter arrived on December 29th, 3 days after Margaret sent it. I knew because I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard Jasper's car pull into the driveway at 11:30 a.m., hours earlier than his usual return from the office. The front door slammed with such force that the windows rattled. I heard his footsteps pounding through the house, rapid and furious. My heart began to race, but I forced myself to remain calm, to keep chopping vegetables for the salad as if nothing unusual was happening. Eleanor. His voice was a roar that echoed through the entire house. Eleanor, get out here now. I set down my knife carefully, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and walked into the living room. Jasper stood in the center of the room, his face flushed red with rage, still wearing his coat. In his hand was a crumpled envelope and several pages of legal letterhead. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide. Jasper? What's wrong? Why are you shouting? He ignored her, his eyes locked on me with an intensity I'd never seen before. What the hell is this? He shook the papers at me. What the hell is this? I assume it's the legal notice Margaret Whitestone sent you, I said, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. Challenging the validity of the property deed transfer from 5 years ago. You hired a lawyer? His voice cracked with disbelief. You're trying to take back the house? Are you out of your mind? Vanessa came down the stairs quickly, her designer heels clicking. What property deed? What's happening? Jasper thrust the papers at her. She's suing me. My own mother is suing me to take back the house she gave me 5 years ago. I didn't give it to you, I said quietly. You convinced me to sign it over while I was in the hospital, heavily medicated, and frightened. You told me nothing would change. That was a lie. A lie? Jasper's laugh was harsh and bitter. I gave you a place to live. I took care of you. This is how you repay me? You took care of me? I felt my own anger rising now, hot and powerful. Jasper, you treat me like hired help in my own home. You stand by while Vanessa gives me orders and tells me to stay out of sight when you have guests. You watched her take my dinner plate and give it to a stranger without saying a word. Is that what you call taking care of me? Oh my God, Vanessa said, her face pale as she read through the legal documents. Eleanor, this is insane. You can't do this. I already have. But why? Jasper's voice was almost pleading now. If you were unhappy, why didn't you just talk to me? Why go straight to lawyers and legal action? I tried to talk to you, I said, my voice shaking with emotion now. On Christmas morning, remember? When you told me this wasn't my house anymore, that I'd made myself dependent on you, that I should be grateful for what you've given me? That conversation? I apologized for that. I told you I was stressed and I didn't mean it. But you did mean it, Jasper. That's exactly how you see me, as someone who should be grateful for being allowed to exist in your space. Someone whose dignity and feelings don't matter as much as your business connections and social climbing. Vanessa was reading further into the documents, her expression growing more horrified with each page. Jasper, this says she's claiming elder abuse. Financial exploitation. Undue influence. She's accusing us of stealing her house. Because that's what happened, I said firmly. That's not what happened. Jasper shouted. You signed the papers willingly. I was helping you with estate planning, protecting you from probate fees and tax complications. This was all for your benefit. Then explain the $200,000 equity loan you took out 6 months after the transfer, I said calmly. Explain the $350,000 refinance last year. Explain how borrowing over $500,000 against my house was for my benefit. The color drained from Jasper's face. He looked like I'd slapped him. Vanessa turned to stare at her husband. What is she talking about? What loans? It's business financing, Jasper stammered. Standard practice. Using home equity to fund business growth. You told me you had investors backing the expansion, Vanessa interrupted, her voice tight. You said the Hendersons and the Blackwell Group were funding the new office. They are, but you also mortgaged the house without telling me? Vanessa's anger was redirecting now, aimed at Jasper instead of me. How much do we owe on this property? That's not relevant right now. How much, Jasper? About $560,000 total, he admitted quietly. But it's all manageable, it's all part of the business plan. $560,000. Vanessa sat down heavily on the couch. We owe more than $500,000 on a house you told me was paid off. A house that apparently might not even be legally yours. It is legally mine, Jasper insisted, turning back to me. Mom signed it over. Willingly. With a notary present. This is just buyer's remorse 5 years too late. The notarization is questionable, I said. The timing is questionable. Your behavior since the transfer is questionable. Margaret seems to think we have a very strong case. Margaret Whitestone is a small-town lawyer who hasn't handled a significant case in years, Jasper shot back. She's filling your head with false hope so she can bill you for her time. She's working pro bono, actually. Because she believes in my case. And because she remembers what you were like as a child, before money and status became more important to you than family. That hit home. I saw him flinch. Jasper, Vanessa said, her voice unnaturally calm now, if Eleanor challenges this deed and wins, what happens to us? She won't win, but if she does. What happens? Jasper ran his hands through his hair, his earlier rage deflating into something closer to panic. If the transfer is invalidated, then technically the loans against the property become problematic. The bank could demand immediate repayment or foreclose. We'd have to come up with the full amount to satisfy the debt, or we'd lose the house. How much do we have in savings? Vanessa asked. Jasper didn't answer. Jasper. How much do we have in savings? About $40,000, he admitted. Vanessa's face went white. $40,000. Against $560,000 in debt. Jesus Christ, Jasper. It's under control. My business is bringing in good revenue, we have clients in the pipeline. You've been lying to me, Vanessa said, her voice hollow. About our financial situation, about the house, about everything. What else don't I know? This isn't about us, Jasper said desperately. This is about Mom trying to destroy everything I've built because her feelings got hurt over a dinner party. Her feelings got hurt? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jasper, you've been systematically erasing me from this house. You've been treating me like an employee at best, an inconvenience at worst. You took my home and turned it into your personal piggy bank while telling me nothing had changed. And now you want to reduce this to hurt feelings over a dinner party? What do you want from me? Jasper asked, his voice breaking. You want me to say I'm sorry? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we didn't make you feel more included. I'm sorry Vanessa asked you to help with hosting. I'm sorry I took out loans against the house. What do you want me to do to fix this? I want my house back, I said simply. I want the deed transferred back to my name, where it should have been all along. That's impossible, Jasper said. I just told you, there are loans, mortgages, legal complications. I can't just give you back the house. Then you should have thought of that before you took it from me under false pretenses. False pretenses? I was trying to help you. I was trying to make sure you were taken care of. No, Jasper. You were trying to secure an asset you could use for your own benefit. If you really wanted to take care of me, you would have helped me keep my house, not convinced me to give it away. Vanessa stood up, the legal documents still in her hand. Eleanor, please. Let's all just calm down and think about this rationally. If you pursue this lawsuit, you'll be tearing this family apart. Is that really what you want? The family was already torn apart, I said. I'm just refusing to pretend otherwise anymore. But we can fix this, Vanessa insisted. We can make changes. You can have more say in household decisions, we can include you more in family activities. I don't want to be included more. I want to stop being treated like I'm invisible unless you need something from me. I want to stop being told to stay in the background when you have important guests. I want to stop cooking and cleaning and serving while my own contributions are claimed by others as their own. What are you talking about? Vanessa's confusion seemed genuine. The cranberry sauce, I said. That Victoria loved so much. The old family recipe you promised to give her for her cookbook. That was my mother's recipe, Vanessa. I taught it to you 7 years ago. But you were going to let her publish it under your name without ever mentioning that it came from me. Vanessa's face flushed. That's what this is about? A recipe? It's about respect. It's about being acknowledged as a person who matters, not just a useful tool you can use and discard. And clearly, that's too much to ask in this house. Jasper sank onto the couch beside Vanessa, his head in his hands. What do you want, Mom? Tell me what you want and let's figure out how to make this work without lawyers and lawsuits. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who I'd sacrificed everything for, and felt a strange mixture of love and disappointment so profound it almost took my breath away. I want you to understand what you've done, I said quietly. I want you to see that you've become someone I don't recognize. Someone who treats people as commodities. Someone who lies and manipulates to get what he wants. Someone who betrayed his own mother's trust for money. I didn't betray you, you did. And the worst part is, I don't think you even understand why it was wrong. You still think this is about me being difficult or oversensitive. You can't see that what you've done is fundamentally, deeply wrong. Vanessa set the papers down on the coffee table. So what happens now? Now, you have 30 days to respond to the legal notice, I said. Margaret suggested we try mediation first, see if we can resolve this without going to court. But that requires good faith negotiation from both sides. And if we can't resolve it? Jasper asked. Then we go to court. Margaret presents our evidence, the questionable notarization, the medical records showing my condition when I signed, the financial exploitation, the text messages and documentation of how I'd been treated since the transfer. A judge decides whether the deed transfer was valid or whether it should be reversed. This will ruin me, Jasper said, his voice barely a whisper. If I lose the house, I lose everything. The business, my reputation, everything I've worked for. Then you shouldn't have built your everything on property that wasn't really yours, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Jasper stared at the floor. Vanessa looked between us, clearly trying to process everything that had just been revealed. I stood there, feeling strangely calm despite the magnitude of what was happening. Finally, Jasper looked up at me. Did you ever love me? He asked. Because I don't understand how someone who loved me could do this. The question stunned me. Did I ever love you? Jasper, I gave you everything. Every sacrifice I made, every extra shift I worked, every dream I postponed or abandoned, it was all for you and your brother. I loved you so completely that I forgot to save anything for myself. And when I needed you to love me back, to treat me with basic decency and respect, you couldn't do it. So don't you dare question my love. Question your own. Tears were running down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. Let him see what his words cost. Let him see the pain he'd caused. I do love you, Jasper said, his own eyes glistening. I know I haven't shown it well lately. I know I've been selfish and focused on the wrong things. But I do love you, Mom. You're my mother. Then act like it, I said. Not with words, but with actions. Show me that I matter to you as a person, not just as someone who can be useful. Show me that family means more to you than money or status or business connections. How? How do I do that? You start by being honest. About the house, about the loans, about everything. You stop making excuses and you own what you've done. And then you work with me and Margaret to find a solution that doesn't leave me powerless and dependent on your goodwill. Vanessa spoke up, her voice subdued. Eleanor, I owe you an apology too. I've been so focused on building our social position, on making the right impressions, that I lost sight of the fact that you're family. The way I've treated you, the things I've said and asked you to do, that was wrong. I'm sorry. I looked at her, trying to assess whether this was genuine contrition or strategic damage control. Her eyes were red, her perfect composure cracked. Maybe it was real. Thank you for saying that, I said carefully. But apologies without change are just words. If you really mean it, things have to be different going forward. They will be, Vanessa promised. I swear. We'll figure this out together. Jasper stood up, wiping his eyes. Can we call off the lawyers? Just for now, while we try to work this out as a family? No, I said firmly. The legal process continues. But I'm willing to try mediation alongside it. If we can reach an agreement that satisfies everyone, then we can drop the lawsuit. But I'm not calling off my lawyer and hoping you'll suddenly do the right thing. I tried trusting you before, Jasper. Look where that got me. He nodded slowly, accepting this. Okay. That's fair. When's the mediation? I'll talk to Margaret and set it up. Probably sometime in the next 2 weeks. And in the meantime? Vanessa asked. What happens with living arrangements? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'll continue staying here unless you ask me to leave. But I won't be cooking or cleaning or serving anymore. I'm not your housekeeper. If you want me gone, say so now and I'll make other arrangements. No, Jasper said quickly. Don't leave. Please. This is still your home. We'll figure out the legal stuff, but please don't leave. I studied his face, looking for manipulation, for calculated strategy. What I saw instead was fear, genuine fear of losing me, not just losing the house. All right, I said. I'll stay. For now. The rest of that day passed in uncomfortable silence. Jasper retreated to his office and spent hours on the phone, with his lawyer, I assumed. Vanessa busied herself with cleaning, something I'd rarely seen her do. I stayed in my room, updating my diary with every detail of the confrontation. That evening, there was a knock on my door. Jasper stood there, still in his work clothes but looking exhausted. Can I come in? I gestured to the small chair by my dresser. He sat down, looking around my cramped room as if seeing it for the first time. This room is tiny, he said quietly. Yes. And you've been living in here for 5 years while Vanessa and I have the master suite, and there are 2 other empty bedrooms just sitting there because she wanted them as guest rooms. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. I really didn't see it, Mom. I know you probably don't believe me, but I genuinely didn't realize how badly we were treating you. It just became normal somehow. The way things were. That's the problem with normalization, I said. People can get used to almost anything if it happens gradually enough. I talked to my lawyer this afternoon. He said your case is strong. The notarization issue alone is enough to raise serious questions, and combined with everything else. He trailed off. Combined with everything else, you might lose. Yeah. He rubbed his face tiredly. He also said that even if I win in court, the publicity would be devastating. Local businessmen sued by elderly mother for elder abuse isn't exactly the headline that attracts high-end clients. I'm not doing this to hurt your business, Jasper. I know. You're doing it because I hurt you. And you're right to. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I don't know how to fix this, Mom. I don't know how to make this right. Start by telling me the truth, I said. All of it. Why did you really want the house transferred to your name? He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Then, quietly, Vanessa's parents are wealthy. Really wealthy. And when we got married, I felt like I had to prove I was worthy of her, that I could provide the lifestyle she was used to. The house was supposed to be part of that, proof that I had assets, stability, family wealth. But we bought the house with a modest mortgage that your father and I paid off over 20 years. There was no family wealth. I know. But once it was in my name, I could use it as collateral. I could borrow against it to expand the business, to invest in opportunities, to maintain the lifestyle we needed to maintain for social connections. It all made sense at the time. And it never occurred to you that you were gambling with my security? That if your business failed or your investments went bad, I'd lose my home? I didn't think I'd fail, he said simply. I thought I'd succeed, pay everything back, and everyone would be better off. You'd have a bigger inheritance eventually, I'd have a thriving business. Win-win. Except I was never consulted. I was never told the risks. You made decisions about my property without my knowledge or consent. You're right. I did. And I'm sorry. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I talked to Vanessa after you went upstairs. Really talked, maybe for the first time in years. She didn't know about the loans either. I've been keeping a lot of secrets, trying to manage everything myself, trying to maintain this image of success while actually struggling. How bad is the business really? Not failing, but not as successful as I've led everyone to believe. The consulting market is competitive. I've been spending money on appearances, the car, the clothes, the club memberships, because that's what you have to do to attract high-end clients. But it's been tight. Really tight. So when I challenge the deed and the bank starts asking questions about the loans, it could all come crashing down, yeah. He looked up at me. But you know what? Maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe I need to stop pretending and start being honest about where I really am. Maybe we need to downsize, simplify, stop trying to keep up with people who inherited their money instead of earning it. That sounds like growth, I said carefully. It sounds like failure to me, he admitted. But maybe failure is better than what I've become. This person who lies to his wife, exploits his mother, and sacrifices relationships for appearances. I hate that person, Mom. I really do. I felt something shift in my chest. This was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Maybe ever. Then change, I said simply. You can't undo what's been done, but you can choose who you're going to be going forward. Will you help me? He asked. With the mediation, with figuring out a solution that works for everyone? I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm asking anyway. I thought about it. About all the pain and betrayal and humiliation. About the years of feeling invisible and unvalued. About the son I'd loved and the stranger he'd become. But I also thought about the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. About the teenager who cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend broke his heart. About the young man who'd stood beside me at his father's funeral and promised we'd get through it together. That person was still in there somewhere. Maybe buried deep, maybe damaged by ambition and social pressure and poor choices. But still there. I'll help, I said finally. But on one condition. Anything. We do this honestly. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more secrets. We put everything on the table and we work toward a solution that respects everyone's needs and dignity. Can you do that? Yes, he said without hesitation. I can do that. I will do that. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Mom? I know I have no right to ask this, but do you think you can ever forgive me? I looked at my son, this flawed, struggling man who'd hurt me so deeply but who was finally being honest about it. I don't know, I said truthfully. But I'm willing to try. After he left, I sat in my small room for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The confrontation, the admissions, the possibility, however slim, of reconciliation. I called Margaret and filled her in on the day's events. He admitted to the loans, she asked, sounding surprised. In front of his wife? Yes. And to using the house as collateral without my knowledge. And to struggling financially while pretending to be successful. Eleanor, those admissions could be very valuable in mediation. But I have to ask, are you sure you want to mediate? With what he's admitted, we could probably win this case outright in court. I know, I said. But he's still my son. If there's a way to resolve this that doesn't completely destroy him, I want to try. Even after everything he's done. Maybe especially because of everything he's done. He needs to learn that there are consequences for hurting people, but also that there's a path to redemption if you're willing to do the work. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't at least give him that chance? Margaret was quiet for a moment. You're a better person than I am, Eleanor. Or a more foolish one. Time will tell. All right. I'll set up the mediation. But Eleanor? Go into this with your eyes open. He may be sorry now, but people don't change overnight. Protect yourself. I will, I promised. I'm not the same woman I was a week ago either. That night, I lay in bed thinking about paths forward. About justice and mercy, consequences and forgiveness, standing up for yourself and extending grace to others. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The mediation process, the difficult conversations, the work of rebuilding trust that had been shattered. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even be possible. But for the first time since that awful Christmas dinner, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. Not naive hope that everything would magically be fine, but realistic hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way to something better than what we'd had. I'd stood up for myself. I'd fought back. I'd refused to accept being diminished and dismissed. And in doing so, I'd reminded my son, and myself, that Eleanor Hartwell was not someone to be underestimated. Whatever happened next, I would face it with dignity, strength, and the knowledge that I deserved better. And that knowledge, I was learning, changed everything. The mediation took 3 sessions spanning 2 months. It was painful, exhausting, and often felt hopeless. But with Margaret's guidance and a skilled mediator named Robert Chin, we eventually reached an agreement. The house was transferred back to my name. In exchange, I agreed to let Jasper and Vanessa continue living there for 2 years while they got their finances in order, paying me reasonable rent that would go toward paying down the loans. After 2 years, they would move to a smaller home they could actually afford, and I would have my house back, free and clear. Jasper had to take out a personal loan to pay off enough of the home equity line to make the bank comfortable with the ownership transfer. It wasn't easy for him, and his business did suffer some setbacks when word got out about his financial troubles. But he survived. More importantly, he changed. Not overnight, and not perfectly, but genuinely. He started going to therapy to deal with his issues around money and self-worth. He and Vanessa downsized their lifestyle significantly, sold the expensive car, quit the country club, stopped trying to keep up appearances they couldn't afford. And he started treating me like his mother again. Vanessa changed too. She got a job, her first in years, working at an art gallery. Having her own income seemed to give her a sense of purpose beyond social climbing. She apologized often in those first few months, and gradually, those apologies were backed up by changed behavior. We had family dinners where I was included as family, not staff. We had conversations where my opinions were valued. We celebrated my 71st birthday with a party where I was the center of attention in the best possible way. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still scars that hadn't fully healed. But it was better. Enormously better. Colin flew in from Seattle when he heard about everything. He was furious at Jasper initially, but I asked him to extend the same grace I was trying to extend. The 2 brothers were slowly rebuilding their relationship too. As for me, I moved back into the master bedroom. My small room at the back of the house became my art studio. I'd started painting again, something I hadn't done since Theodore died. I had time, space, and most importantly, dignity. I still cooked sometimes, but because I wanted to, not because I was expected to. I still helped around the house, but as an equal contributor, not as unpaid labor. And I'd learned something crucial: it's never too late to stand up for yourself. At 70 years old, I'd fought for my dignity and won. Not just the legal battle, but something more important: I'd won back my sense of self-worth. Victoria Ashford, ironically, became an unexpected part of this story's ending. When she heard about what had happened, Millbrook was a small town, after all, she reached out to me. She apologized for her behavior during her visit and, more surprisingly, asked if she could feature my mother's cranberry sauce recipe in her cookbook, with full attribution to me and my mother's memory. The cookbook came out last month. There, on page 147, was Eleanor Hartwell's traditional cranberry sauce, with a note about it being passed down through 3 generations. Vanessa had insisted on including a photo of me in the book. Small victories, maybe. But they mattered. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't mean you can't also extend forgiveness. That you can demand better treatment while still loving the people who hurt you. That strength and compassion aren't opposites, they're partners. My story isn't about a perfect happy ending where everything is resolved and everyone lives happily ever after. It's about something more real and more valuable. It's about reclaiming your dignity, setting boundaries, and refusing to accept treatment that diminishes you. It's about remembering that you matter. No matter your age, no matter how dependent you think you are on others, no matter how long you've accepted the unacceptable, you matter. And it's never too late to start acting like it. To anyone out there who feels invisible, who's being taken for granted, who's told they should be grateful for crumbs while others feast at the table they set, you deserve better. Stand up. Speak out. Fight back. You're worth it.